We are 1/3 of the way through G1 block play, and we're breaking down the tournament thus far and looking ahead to the coming week. The leaders are Zack Sabre Jr., just like we predicted. Evil, because you got to have a heel, right? And Yuya Uemura, just like we predict. Yeah, okay, no one predicted that. But with Jeremy Finestone, I'm Steven Conway. This is Speaking of Strong Style. Welcome, everyone, to Speaking of Strong Style, where we discuss the news, issues, and events surrounding New Japan Pro Wrestling. Of course, almost all of our attention, really, is on the G1 Climax tournament. We are 4 nights into the tournament. 3 matches in each block are complete, and it's been a fascinating tournament for the most part, with a couple of exceptions that we're definitely going to be talking about. It's been an excellent tournament. Full of excitement and some true surprises here, Jeremy. I couldn't be a whole lot more satisfied as a fan at this stage. There has been enough to trip me up and surprise me, enough that things that I hoped I would see that I have seen. So I'm pretty satisfied customer after 3 block matches. How are you feeling?
I feel like I've been punched in the face by New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Oh, my goodness.
You know what I mean? It's just like they came out and there was a certain expectation that you just kind of knew where everything was going. You know, Callum Newman and Bolt Nolig eked their way into the G1, and you kind of knew where everybody kind of stood in the pecking order. And then the first night of the G1 happened, and it was almost like you had that movie trailer where it's like everything that you know to be true is not true anymore. And that's basically what the G1 has been ever since then. It's flipped all of our thoughts about these wrestlers kind of on its head and given us new life. I'm definitely re-energized and ready to talk about this.
Well, we have some great people here with us live already. Dunstan has sent in some questions. Dunstan, thank you for those. We will definitely get to those. Colin is here. Flaming Shark is here. So this is going to be great.
Hello, everybody.
And to anyone else who's watching, we're glad you are joining us today. So, Hassan is here too. Fantastic. Good. We've got a lot to get into. So again, 4 shows, and so we're not going to be breaking this down match by match by match, show by show, but we are going to certainly go over each wrestler in the G1 and discuss their journey thus far. Jeremy, does that sound like a smarter way of doing this?
I'm going to follow your lead, buddy, because you've got this mapped out, and we got 90 minutes to cover a lot of territory.
We do have a lot to cover, but overall, the only other thing I wanted to mention that's non-G1 related is El Desperado's injury. We have some clarification on it. We found out that he has a meniscus tear, and he is going to get that surgically repaired. And in a video he posted on social media, he mentioned that it has been bothering him for 6 months, and he's been working around it. He said compensating for it has led to back pain and back issues now. So it's best to go ahead and get it taken care of, partially while the juniors are on a break, really. There's not only the prelim tags. We're seeing some of the guys out there. So now's the time to do it. And, you know, one of those things, Jeremy, you start working on a bad knee, then you get a bad back, then you get bad hips. And this stuff can really snowball if you don't get it taken care of. So while I will certainly miss a guy that I feel is one of the very best junior heavyweights in the world, this seems like a very smart long-term thing to go ahead and take the G1 time to get your knee worked on, rehab it, come back stronger.
It's a great plan to address these things head on than perhaps going into like a G1 with something like injury with bad knees that would lead to a bad back, to lead to so many other things. Maybe you couldn't go all the way in the G1 the way that you'd want to. I really respect Desperado for just seeing his limitations and knowing what he had to do.
All right, so G1 Climax tournament. Now let's start with the standings, and we'll start with A block, of course, and look at that, and then we'll start breaking down what everybody's doing here. So we have in the A block, the leader in the clubhouse, Zack Sabre Jr. Now, that's no surprise at all. We figured that would be the case. He's sitting on 6 points. Evil sitting on 6 points as well, both undefeated thus far in the tournament. 1 match back, so to speak. So with 4, we have Shingo Takagi and Gabe Kidd. A slew of guys on just 2, and that's Shota Umino, Tetsuya Naito, only on 2, Sanada 2, Callum Newman, and Jake Lee with 2. And sitting with the goose egg is the Great Okan, who, despite scoring no points, is actually having a really interesting tournament, a good tournament, and has a fun story going so far. So let's talk about each of these. And before we do, Shark has a comment that I think is worth getting to. He says, this G1 is already exciting, and New Japan is definitely using our understanding of the promotion against us this year already. And I mean that in a good way, if that isn't clear. That's a good way of putting it, Shark. I'm glad you said it that way, because it is playing off expectations in a way that still makes sense. It's been pretty smart booking. Colin says he watched part of today's show and he was stunned by one result. And Hassan, we're going to get to your comment when the time comes, because you're right.
Listen, let's stop right there. If you are watching now, we are going to talk spoilers.
Yes.
So if you want to talk about the results of everything that's happened up to this point, type away. Don't worry about the spoilers. This is a very explicit night 1 through night 4 recap show. So just go for it.
And there was a show earlier today. So if you haven't gotten to it yet, we're going to wreck it for you if you're listening live.
Right.
Just so as you know. Zack Sabre Jr. So we'll start with the leader in the clubhouse here. He has defeated Great Okan, then Tetsuya Naito, and those were his first 2. Then he beat Callum Newman. So his match on opening night with Great Okan, Okan fought him in the crowd some, threw him through those flimsy barricades they have into the seats. That looked pretty dangerous, actually. Mm-hmm. They ended up squaring off in the crowd, which did not go well for Zack. That was Great Okan's advantage. But he ended up hitting Okan with the Zack driver. We're going to talk about Okan's story when we get to him specifically. But that was an opening win that I think we all expected for Zack. We thought he would get off on the right foot, but a good match to start off with.
There's something a little concerning about Flaming Shirt's comment about using our understanding of promotion against us.
Yes.
As well as Zack Sabre Jr. going 3-0 into the G1 A block. And with everyone's preconceived notion that this guy is the guy to win it this year, the favorite, there's a lot of red flags that maybe it's not going to work out for Zack Sabre Jr. And there has to be an immense struggle at some point coming up that I'm at a loss to find out exactly where this hill that he needs to overcome is going to happen, because there kind of has to be that, right?
Well, we discussed this in the preview show with Chris Samsa. I felt that he would beat Naito, then win the G1, and the story would be, now I get you in the dome for the title, and the last time we met, I beat you. And so far, we got that. There are a couple other things that were, you mentioned those red flags. They were kind of flying there in the second night of G1, and here's what I mean. Against Naito, they teased another flash pin like they'd done in the past, where they had a short G1 match where somebody got a flash pin, but it didn't happen. Naito managed to turn the Zack driver into a half Destino. There was a quieter crowd the second night there, but they started getting things going late. Zack sold his left arm big for Naito, and in the end, a pinning scramble broke out, and Zack got the best of it with a bridging roll-up, which was the second one of those after they did a great near fall where he would roll up Naito and do the bridge. They did one for like a 2.9 count, and then they ended up doing one for the win. Really good match. And we'll talk about Naito as well, of course. No Destino, not a full one. We'll get like
we'll get to Naito. Naito's going to get his old chapter in this podcast.
Zack is wrestling supremely well. And that match against Great Okan was one of the better Great Okan matches for a while. This match against Naito was excellent. Naito, if he's as banged up as we think he is, then Zack is in the same position with him that he is with Tanahashi. The great thing about Zack is you can have a wonderful match without taking 500 bumps in it. Because he can just work the ground so well, submission so well. You can do other things and still have a fantastic match with Zack Sabre Jr., and Naito did. The thing is the red flags we're talking about. Like if we're thinking that he's going to win this G1 and go on to the dome, he beats Naito, then grabs the world heavyweight title belt and runs through the crowd with it as Naito is sitting there stunned on the mat, and he's now 0-2. This title match might happen before the Dome, right? I mean, that's the.
I don't even know. I don't even know. But when I saw that, I'm like,
might be overthinking it, but it spooked me a little bit. Like, oh, geez, okay, let's hold off on this for a minute.
It could also be part of a video package for the Tokyo, for the Wrestle Kingdom.
It
you
could
know,
be anything.
But you watch it in the real time moment, and you're just like, well, shit, because they don't like. Booking is not supposed to hit you over the head, obviously. It's supposed to hit you over the head, like, not obviously. Like, you're supposed to look back at all these things, like, oh, laying down the groundwork. But it's not supposed to be so obvious that you're like, everybody can tell what you're doing because you want to feel like you're figuring it out on your own. You know, but it was so explicit. And it was so just, like, there. And... you know, like I'm watching Zack Sabre Jr. in this tournament and I look at him and I see him as the legitimizing force in the tournament for New Japan to say this is the high class, best of the best wrestlers in the world. If you are the best technical wrestler, if you are whatnot, you are in this tournament. And Zack Sabre Jr. wrestling the way that he is from the get-go, being top class, maybe even Olympic level around the Olympics, is that kind of legitimizing factor, like I'm trying to say, in which he may not end up winning this whole thing, but the way that he's wrestling levels up the entire tournament as a whole.
Yeah, the matches really have been excellent. His match against Callum Newman was very, very good. One of Newman's better matches, and Newman's had some good ones. The key to this, and Shark mentions it here too, him being 3-0, it's just going a little bit too well for Zach at the moment, which is a little bit spooky. But again, I think that there's little doubt that he's going to get a title shot. We mentioned that Chris Sampson brought a stat with him to the show last week that a surprising number of people who beat the champion in the G1 do not receive a title shot afterwards, more than we thought, right? And I think that Zach is certainly going to fall into the category of guys who do, even if he doesn't win the G1, he's still my favorite to win the G1 because, you know, he can have a couple of trip ups late, but still kind of have, you know, get in. I think my prediction was he would win the number 1 seed in the block, and it would be Naito and Jake Lee facing off. That still to be seen. A lot of tournaments still to go. Mm-hmm. All that's still in play. But if I'm a Zack Sabre Jr. fan, I feel comfortable my dude's getting a title shot whether he wins a G1 or not.
Sure. Let me ask you this. When it comes to the irresistible force versus, say, the immovable object, the next match that Zack Sabre Jr. has is against Jake Lee. Well, do you think that level of work rate and quality is going to transfer over, or is Zack Sabre Jr. going to be trying to be wrestling the immovable object as an irresistible force, and which one gives first?
This will be the greatest challenge of Zack Sabre's G1 Climax 34, and not in terms of in storyline wise. You know, beating the world heavyweight champion was probably the biggest challenge. In real life pro wrestling terms, as a performance, getting a good match out of Jake Lee will be a titanic struggle for him. We'll see how he does. We'll see.
I don't know how I'm going to get through the Jake Lee segment without feeling like a complete asshole talking about Jake Lee.
But yeah, so Zach 3-0 again with wins against Great Khan, Tetsuya Naito, and Callum Newman. So that is one of the guys at 6. The other is Evil, and Evil is not having great matches by design. Again, we're going into this House of Torture thing where what it is. House of Torture.
The G1 press conference. He's like, I'm not going to have good matches, but I'm going to win. And it's like,
and that's exactly what he's doing. And the thing is, we know that Watanabe is a good wrestler. We've seen him have plenty of good matches. Same thing with Ren Narita, but their House of Torture character is that they are rejecting all structure of New Japan. The idea that you go in there with warrior spirit and have the best match you possibly can. That's part of the DNA of New Japan. It's part of what we love about the company. House of Torture as heels reject all that and say, we're not here to entertain you people. Like, even the War Dogs are there to entertain us. They all just say, I'm here to show you I am the best. I am the greatest. Evil and Narita don't care if they are the best or the greatest. They just care that they win. And that's rebelling against all that. And it makes them really good, strong heels. And within the New Japan, canon, within that whole ethos of New Japan. So what we're seeing from Evil is that he beat Gabe Kidd with some help from Dick Togo, of course. The Kid demolished Togo and Evil before the match even started. He started beating him up in the aisle, threw Togo in the ring, gave him a brainbuster, gave a moonsault from the buckle to Evil on the floor. They fought in the crowd. They even did Evil's baseball bat swing with the chair thing again. We haven't seen that in a while. Then the match started after all that. But as that match went on, Kid's temper got the best of him. He shoved Marty Asami out of the ring, which allowed Togo to interfere, leading to the Everything is Evil. And so once again, Gabe Kidd's temper got the best of him there. And after going hard on Evil and Evil just staying calm and almost paying Kidd no attention, he had a plan. He knew the Kid would eventually self-destruct. So with Jake Lee in his second match, they had the usual ref bump and interference. Lee missed a face break in the exposed corner. Togo used the powder. Evil hit Everything is Evil. That match wasn't short enough. And then he goes in against Sonata. And we're going to talk about Sonata down the road right here, who has been a non-entity in this tournament. They did the ref bump, the Togo stuff, exchanged low blows, and another low blow later after they did a bunch of big moves led to a neckbreaker finish. None of these matches were particularly great. The Kid match was the best of the bunch. Mm-hmm. And there really wasn't a bad match on night one except for Jake Lee and Sonata, which was for a reason. But basically, he's the threat to mess this entire thing up at the end and not give us what we want, which are those great dramatic G1 matches when it's all on the line. So they've done this before with Evil. They've done it before with other members of House of Torture, where they kind of dangle them in front of us, saying that these guys are going to drop in and take away what you were hoping for, which is that hardcore G1 strong style dramatic match. But I have a feeling that he's going to trip over a few hurdles late in this tournament.
Yeah, Evil's going to be threatening all the way through. But here's the thing about Evil. I think that his end game at Wrestle Kingdom is likely Tanahashi with this whole president versus president thing.
There you go.
So if you have that in mind, you're going to just kind of rule out Evil as a guy that starts strong when everyone else got a little punked out by the new kids on the block. And he just kind of had a momentum streak that likely won't sustain. Yeah. There's too much talent, and he's got a strength of schedule on the front half that really kind of afforded him like some benefits, whereas the others haven't. He's not faced Yuya Uemura yet. He hasn't faced some of these. I'm sorry, not Yuya Uemura. Zack Sabre Jr. yet. Some of these other guys. I just have Yuya on my mind. I just love Yuya right now.
He hasn't faced Shingo. He hasn't. Yeah.
He has not faced all the top guys. We got Naito and him coming into this next one. And if you think Naito's losing to Evil, so that Evil's going 4-0 and Naito's going 1-3, like it could happen. Like it could, but I wouldn't pick that. Like
with the exception of the obvious one, which is when they were first establishing Evil as a heel again after leaving LIJ, they really don't have Naito lose to the House of Torture shenanigans much. It's more that Naito is a little too slick for them, a little too savvy, and willing to play dirty also. And, he usually overcomes it, not always. And I have a feeling we're probably going to see that here. I agree with you. I don't see him beating Naito. And you're right, strength of schedule's had something to do with it. Mm-hmm. And again, just to establish him as somebody that couldn't muck everything up. You're absolutely right. They also formed that committee and announced that committee just before the tournament. So there's something cooking on that. This committee that is allegedly to make things a little more fair, and that is an obvious shot at House of Torture and putting a target on House of Torture. I have a feeling, I mentioned that before the end of this tournament, I think there will be something to all that. I think there will be fire with that smoke. And right now it's just a matter of establishing him as a real problem to be dealt with.
I look at Evil. And I talked about this in our preview with Chris Samsa, that this was Naito's G1. Like all the stories kind of center around Naito. And Evil's legacy with Naito and Sonata and LIJ before House of Torture goes back a very, very long time. And so in a lot of ways, I look at Evil as a supporting character in Naito's story when it comes to this G1, rather than Evil being a main protagonist, if you will. He's more of an antagonist, but a supporting character, if you will, for what's going on with the ghost of Naito haunting him in this entire block.
Shark brings up something that gives me nightmares, and I'm just going to mention this here because I thought about this as well. He says, does Tanahashi put his presidency on the line against the end of House of Torture, perhaps? Probably too dramatic, but it would fit Evil and Tanahashi's stories. Here's what I'm worried about, Shark, that the match at Wrestle Kingdom is the rematch with that stipulation, because at some point Evil has taken the presidency from Tanahashi in storyline, whether it's a King of Pro Wrestling or someplace earlier, and the good guys coming back and regaining it at Wrestle Kingdom is what I had a flashback to. Not a flashback to, that's wrong, but the nightmare about, like, we would have to endure a month or two of Evil actually as president to get to that. And well, Shark's on board. He says, oh God, yes, please.
I mean, if you did a thing where Tanahashi lost control of New Japan to House of Torture, and they were running things, and it required Shota Umino and Yuya Uemura and all these young guys to team up and knock him down, and it's like a storyline from Wrestle Kingdom to Dominion. I mean, there's something to that. There's a big picture thing where it's like, okay, the old generation lost control, and it's the new guys that have to take it back. And then you legitimize them even more than you're doing, right now, which, my goodness, they're legitimizing this young generation.
Yeah, something along that. Then you can go back to Shota and Narita if you want to, or Uemura and Narita, and just fight for the soul of New Japan Pro Wrestling. Oh God, well, we're already booking Wrestle Kingdom.
A completely new concept that you're taking a risk, or Bullet Club again. So where do you go with it? No,
God. All right. We're already booking Wrestle Kingdom. We're not even into the G1 yet.
No, we're still talking G1. It's an evil world we live in.
It is. Okay, so let's talk about the people at 4. Now, the 4 points now. So those are the 2 at 6. They're co-leaders at this point. After that, you have a really interesting couple of guys at 4. So this is only one match back. To me, the most interesting one and the biggest threat to make the playoffs is Shingo Takagi. He defeated Naito on night 1 in a really, really good match. The fans were divided because Shingo is so popular. Of course, Naito is very popular. Naito was still unstable on the ropes on this one, which makes me think his knees are still pretty shot, but it was still an excellent match. He worked around it beautifully. Tried the Destino, couldn't hit it, which was the beginning of either the beginning of a story or them just using real life stuff in a story as we go. We saw Takagi Driver 98, a straight jacket driver that he does. Don't see that one all that often. So they pulled out some stops against each other we don't normally see. And eventually he did manage to hit the last of the Dragon to win. Thankfully, Chris Charlton was on commentary there because Walker blew the call and called it a Made in Japan. But hey,
how many people actually get the Made in Japan and Last of the Dragon mixed up? Right? Like, the Last of the Dragon is on the shoulders, right? Yeah. And then the Made in Japan is basically like a flip scoop, like slam.
Yeah, they don't look particularly the same. But as a matter of fact, Made in Japan and Karma, Yoshihashi's move, same thing. So, Walker blew the call, but Chris was there, thankfully. And again, Walker's working on learning the moves. He's not particularly there yet. He has learned the difference between a Taharis and a Hurricane Rana, though. That's good. I
definitely get the sense that there's an enthusiasm to get the call right, that sometimes he'll jump it. And he's got the wrong move lined up in his head, but it's just reps. You know what I mean? It's just the reps, right?
Yeah. It's important. It's important to remember he's not a year into this. He's not a year into this yet, is he?
No, but even 3 or 4 years, he was hired with faith and confidence that he was going to grow into the job, and with that comes mistake making, and he's definitely made mistakes. But he's going to get better, and he's going to be fine.
The storytelling aspect's pretty strong, and he and Chris do work together well. Yes. So that's been good.
And he keeps things on track when some of the wrestlers kind of get off track.
He has had to deal with the non-Chris Charlton commentary. There's been some good and bad. I thought Callum Newman was actually decent today. He's not a natural announcer, but he did a good job. And Phantasmo was so in character that it kind of took away from the broadcast that we'll get into.
Yes.
But we know Phantasmo can do it, but he was choosing not to because of the story he's telling. And we'll get more into that when we get to his part of the program. But Walker had to keep all that together, and he did a good job on that.
Did Shingo give Naito his best match of the tournament so far?
Oh boy, it's hard to say with Naito if the Zack match or the Shingo match was, but I think Shingo had more emotion to it, and it had a better crowd, a larger crowd, and a louder crowd. So I think atmosphere-wise, Shingo was the better, barely. But both of them gave him a really good match. Shingo, though, lost on night 2 to Shota Umino, and a bit of a surprise to me anyway on that one, but not a shock. But I was kind of picking Shingo in this one, but it was a really good match. Umino is certainly beat up, but he's wrestling well. Big moves in this one were really great. Like when they started hitting their big stuff on one another, it was a lot of fun. Umino ended up getting a Death Rider. Excellent match to test Umino's toughness coming off an injury. And I made a note, Jeremy, when I was, it's here in my longhand notes. You have been in a pro wrestling match when you wrestle Shingo Takagi. And what I mean by that is it's not a night off. You're getting hit hard, but safely. I don't think Shingo does anything recklessly, but he does everything real snug. He does everything precise. And I have a feeling that after you wrestle a match like this, a singles match and a feature spot with Shingo Takagi, you probably feel it for a day or two.
I really liked the Shingo and Shota match, but I felt like it was all taking a back seat to Shota's injury and not Shingo's. I felt like Shingo took a back seat to Shota's story in the match, which was a little weird to me. Like they were really hammering the Shota injury rather than the match between Shingo and Shota as much. And that might have just been a personal takeaway from it, but when I was writing all my notes, like his injury seemed to be the dominant factor in the match. Like they were centering around that almost to a point that it was distracting. And it was like they were trying to set you up that this injury was really, really, really bad.
Yes.
And for me, when you have just beaten the champion, like talking up Shingo should have been more of a priority rather than the injury that the other guy had, because it almost felt like selling the injury so much made it seem like that was giving away the ending rather than you had this guy who just beat the champ and he's wrestling this guy with an injury that was selling it so hard that it made me think the Shota was winning this match before he actually did. And I think that was the part that just kind of got to me.
Yeah, and it was a Death Rider loss for Shingo right there in that match.
But it was good. It was a really good match.
It was a very good match. His third match was also really good. It was with Great-O-Khan, and it just shows you how good of a worker Shingo is. And we've seen the good version of Great-O-Khan. We'll talk about him in a little bit. But that was a hard-hitting match that also went very, very well. Shingo ended up getting the best of that one, won it with a pumping bomber. And that's as much a part of Great-O-Khan's story as it is Shingo's. Shark has an interesting take on this. He says, Umino is so good against truly elite talent. Fighting against the best of the best, he shines. Certainly has. But when he's not in there with the best, it's more hit or miss. True.
Hit or miss,
I think,
or motivated or not motivated.
Well, we don't know. But the key to that is when he gets up to that truly elite level, he's going to need to carry other people instead of needing to be with people who can raise him. You got to be the one that does the raising if you're going to be truly elite.
Bring everyone up to your level rather than wrestle and expect everyone to get there. Like
and he says,
that's
and Shark, he's like a sports team that plays up or down to his competition. Yeah, that's it. That's what he is. And Shingo's killing it as always. Yeah, I agree. He's been fantastic, and I think he's going to be involved in this until the very end. Might sneak into the playoffs, perhaps. Shingo's going to be around.
Yeah, I definitely think this guy is getting to 10 points, might get to 12. I don't even know what the get in is going to be at this year. With the way that things are going, it's entirely possible that 10 points and you're in. You might squeak in with 10 or 11 points this year. I don't think so. I think we're going to get math that gets, 6 and 3 gets you into like post block play. But I am going off a preconceived notion with that assumption. And I can tell you 100% preconceived notions are going to get you nowhere in this G1.
There have been plenty of past G1s with 2 blocks and 20 people. So this format, but without the playoffs, where 10 points would have gotten you in to a playoff if it were in effect in those past years. So, 5 and 4 is not a death sentence in this tournament at all.
It's tiebreaker era, but these tiebreakers are done very deliberately.
Sure. Gabe Kidd is also on 4 points, and he's been a much more interesting one. Lost to Evil on night 1, like we mentioned. Then he beat Great Okan. They wrestled each other early, and he said, all right, let's wrestle. You want to wrestle? Let's wrestle. Because, of course, Okan has all that martial arts training and wrestling training. He wrestled early, fought on the floor, since Okan wants to wrestle other people's style. We'll get to that. So they did a little bit of Gabe Kidd stuff. Teased the double count out hard, but they ended up fighting it out, and Gabe Kidd hit a rebound lariat to win it. And then for Shota Umino, he came out with a completely different personality. He walked not stoically, but almost like he was just came out like a killer. He wasn't ranting and raving. He just glared at Umino and walked, barely moving his arms down to the ring. They just like he was waiting to be off the leash to kill him. And after the match, which he won, he said that he hated Umino more than anyone for what he stands for, what he means to people. Nothing gets Gabe Kidd's goat more than Shota Umino, and he just wanted to destroy him. And he came out laser focused. He has a charisma unlike anyone else right now. Kidd's intensity and his work is really good. That match included a long Boston Crab spot to hurt Umino's back and hip, and then he hit a Dr. Bomb to win it. Really good-looking Dr. Bomb, by the way. Good performances, good intensity. Kidd has been one of the most intriguing people in a very good tournament.
Man, the dislike that Gabe Kidd and Shota Umino have for each other almost seems personal. And I don't know what's going on there, but I can feel an energy there that is just... They did not feel bad about the shots they were laying in with each other. With that said, it will be very interesting to me to see how long New Japan can hold off from turning Gabe Kidd into their version of Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Right.
Like a babyface version of Stone Cold Steve Austin for this thing. He's got something, and whether you like him or not, this crowd at the G1 desperately wants to cheer him. Like there was no... The fact that New Japan leaned into Evil versus Gabe Kidd on night 1 just to measure how much Gabe Kidd was going to get cheered against Evil, who is, arguably their purest heel in the entire promotion. Oh, he got cheered. And in that match against Shota Umino, he got cheered. Like this crowd loves them Gabe Kidd.
He's going to be someone fans love to hate, even if they accept him as a heel, but he's going to be one of those guys that has that subset of people who just cheer him no matter what the hell he does.
He's got something, man. Like he is a magnet to the crowd. Like he's catnip. You know what I mean? Like they see him and they're like, yes, what you are, like this is pro wrestling. And that Shota match was the meanest match I felt like I've seen in a while. And watching Shota basically crying coming out of that match and like dragging himself to the back, which they lingered on that one quite a bit, might I add. Just made Gabe Kidd seem like a killer.
Yeah, I think they have big plans for him that probably don't involve the War Dogs down the road. So Tetsuya Naito is on 2 points and probably the most intriguing person on 2 right now. We mentioned the matches already for the most part. He had lost to Zack, lost to Shingo, and then beat Jake Lee in Hiroshima. He hasn't done a full Destino in any one of these matches. He's worked around it. He's hit half of one off of a chokeslam attempt against Lee. That was the thing. He couldn't quite stay steady on the ropes. Yet, part of Naito's thing, he's never been dominant. If you watch like Naito's entire career, he doesn't steamroll people. He overcomes in a tough battle. That's his thing. It was when he was Stardust Naito. It was when he was the heel LIJ. He didn't go through and steamroll people. He didn't squash people. He didn't mow them down. He would barely overcome these struggles. He would squeak through. And when he turned babyface again as an LIJ member, he would get beaten down. He'd have to hit a couple of Destinos, full Destinos to win the thing. He's never been a dominant guy. So as his body is troubling him, they have actually worked that into the story that he can't do what he used to do, but he's still in it all the way until the very end. And I think he's 1-2 right now after a murderer's row to start it off with. You got Jake Lee, who they're pushing. He overcame Jake and may have sent Jake over the edge because Jake Lee behaved differently after that match than he has. Like the frustration with Naito was building, which still goes to what I was talking about, that Lee's going to be the one to knock Naito out of this tournament later because he's just going to lose he's going to blow his stack. Naito is going to be in this. And I think that all of this is going to be part of his story, but that struggle, that willingness to go that extra mile and barely overcome insurmountable obstacles, they're going to work this health issue into that. And I think that's what we're seeing throughout this tournament. I think he's a brilliant worker. He's never been the real physical specimen and the most spectacular guy. But I think he can still get a lot out of this version of Naito to get through this tournament into the Dome.
I gotta tell you, I was pretty bummed out with that Jake Lee match. Naito. I don't know if it's Jake Lee's fault. I don't know if it's Naito's fault. I do know that I was really sad watching that match, and there's only so much you can do with, we're going to play in physical limitations with our world champion before it just feels like, are you sure this guy should be world champion going into Wrestle Kingdom? There were a lot of missed spots and there were a lot of gaps with the first few matches that Naito had. And you have one in like the first one, you're like, okay. Like you have it in the next, you're like, oh man. And he had this with Jake Lee. And the Jake Lee match, like, it was a hard match to watch. Like, yes. Frankly speaking, it was not a good match. You can argue, I've had friendly arguments, if you will, with people who hold Naito responsible for that bad match. There are people, I kind of think that Jake Lee should be as a little bit of culpability that match. Maybe it's both. I'm not entirely sure. But when you get to a point where you're actively worried that your world champion may be a liability, that's the problem. And this isn't like the first time. We can go back to the G1 last year when he got knocked out in a Will Ospreay match near the end of the tournament. Like he's had moments throughout the years, and we are nearing the sunset of Naito's career in the main event, rather than the sunrise, if you will. And it's just a matter of what is your threshold and what is your patience for it. It's like we are in a rebuild, and what is most important is not that we protect Naito, it is that Naito is protected so that he can put over the next generation in a way that is proper and keeps the promotion sustainable. It is not to protect Naito for Naito's sake. And that is the thing to keep in mind.
Without Okada, without Ospreay, Naito is the only person left in the company who can anoint another top star. That's it. You can't do it without him. Anyone else just looks incomplete without that win over Naito. It has to be him. He knows that. And I think he's powering through a very difficult run here. But I also don't think that it is storyline that he's blowing these Destinos. I think he can't do the Destino right now. And he might be able to pull one out when he absolutely has to in a more dramatic sense. I don't know. We're going to find out. But the fact that they are even working around it shows how smart of a worker he is. And the fact of the matter is, I'm kind of blaming Jake Lee for it. It's for that match because his stuff with Shingo, his stuff with Zack, two very, very great workers, no question about that. Were two very good matches. So he can still have good matches. He can still have very dramatic matches, but he has to be in there with someone who can help him. And Jake Lee couldn't.
I just this feels like an audition for Jake Lee, and I don't know what he's thinking. You know what I mean? I'm watching this. I'm like, you want to get this audience to think that you're the shit? I'm like, I don't think you're the shit, but we can use that word in another meaning if you like.
Well, let's talk about Jake now because he demolished Sonata in under 5 minutes on night one, which in a match that was just designed to put him over as a new threat.
2 moves. He hit 2 moves.
Yeah. So that was done to send a message. That was strictly there. His other matches have not been good at all. And I mentioned that I do find him charismatic. I do find him a little interesting, but I have to admit that he's just not living up to it within the ring at all. So while I do think he is an interesting character, I think his presentation and his interviews are good. I do find something interesting about the guy, but I cannot sit here and say he's wrestling well. He absolutely isn't. And these matches have been slow. They've been dull. He's been the Yujiro Takahashi of this tournament, which I didn't anticipate, but it's just I just want his matches to kind of be over with. His loss to Evil, we described that earlier. He was just out healed. I also think it's interesting, Jeremy, that Geto isn't even out with him. I mean, Geto comes out with the other War Dogs, but not him. His loss to Naito, he was quote unquote leading that match. Naito was doing most of the selling, but he also flipped out after that match. So there's some sort of story here that Naito was under his skin like no one else can. And really, Naito's gotten the best of him just about every step of this thing.
He spit at the crowd that night. What the hell was that?
Yeah, he's just losing his stuff when it comes to Naito. Naito is just making him gaga. So we'll see. He's only 1-2, so he will have to get on a roll if I want my original prediction to come true, which is he is the one that eliminates Naito. I'm not sure I want to see that match again after what I'm seeing for Lee right now. So maybe I'll be happy to be wrong, but Lee has not been impressive. I can't say otherwise.
I feel like I'm doing it explain like I'm 5 when I say, Steven, this is a work rate company, right?
Yeah.
It is, predominantly hard work and, strong style, stiff work in the ring and, physicality. What's not working for me is that Jake Lee is using the idea of presence to get himself over as a character. And when you have presence, you require charisma. Charisma is something that he's actually not only lacking, but he's actively sucking from everyone else in the ring when he is in there.
Yeah, that's Sonata's job, damn it. That's Sonata's job. We already have one of those.
There's a heel version of Sonata, and there's the name of Jake Lee. There is an aspect where I'm watching this, and I feel like I'm watching Kevin Nash in WWF in the late 1990s before he just goes over there, where it's just these big plotting matches where they're just not really doing all that much, but it's trying to tell a story of this is a big, dangerous guy, and he's going to get you. And it's just, okay, well, what happens when he gets you? And
that's an interesting one. It's an interesting that you mentioned Nash because, a big plotting guy. And like you said, the story is, well, he's as big and dangerous when he gets you. And then Kevin Nash wouldn't do anything when he got anyone because he couldn't. He didn't even look dangerous on offense. And it's the same thing with Lee.
In the corner and choke slams. I'm it's right there. And you're just watching it. And you're just there were so many people that wanted Jake Lee to just be just a breath of fresh air. You know what I mean? And it's they didn't need him. I guess they had the people on the roster and they're waiting to unleash him. You know, like
I mean,
he's not been what I've wanted him to be. And I think it's entirely on him that he has failed to engage the New Japan audience in a way when he had a perfect opportunity to do so.
yeah, and you know, like we mentioned, Shark is mentioning here, the Ghetto has only been coming out with Finlay in the G1. He hasn't been coming out with Kidd either. He says
Super weird that he recruited Jake Lee by himself over in Noah, but he hasn't been with Jake Lee at all. That's something to keep an eye on.
It is. And we talked about that he might not end the tournament with him. But there it is. And Sonata, let's get into Sonata real quick. Well, no. I'll tell you what. I'm going to change my mind. Let's talk about Shota. He looked a little rusty in his first match against Callum Newman, I thought. Kind of struggled to keep up with Newman. But then again, you know, Newman moves very quickly. And if you are hurting, that can be a trouble spot there. That he did look like he was struggling to keep up with Newman, but of course he's the fastest guy out there. Newman ended up winning with an ass cutter. It wasn't bad, but I think Umino needed this match to get back into the flow of things. It was the shake the rust off match, and that was gone on nights 2 and 3. I thought he's still definitely banged up, but I didn't feel like he was behind, so to speak. He won an excellent match with Shingo the next night, and that first singles win in Osaka ever. And you can make the case that it was his biggest singles victory of his career thus far, considering he's lost most of his major matches. And the Kidd match was a setback for him in the standings, but it was to further a story with Kidd a little bit, keep Umino away from the front runners and their stories. Again, I don't think this is Umino's year in the G1. I think he has a different story going into Wrestle Kingdom than the World Heavyweight title. So that Kidd match is one that can keep him a point or two behind the front runners and just be one of those losses that ends up costing you in the end. I think, again, he'll probably end up with 8, maybe just miss out on the playoffs. I don't think he's going to, lose out in this tournament right there, but he's wrestling well. Like I said, that Newman match, shake it all off, but he's been good in the other two. So good things for Shota, but probably not his year.
I think he's going to be suffering for the next few matches as a result of that Gabe Kidd match that we talked about, because it did not end well for him. And I think he's facing the Great Okan. That's the Great Okan is probably going to take advantage of that and be a little physical with him. I don't feel great about Shota Umino's chances, but it could be, from here on out, it's just, overcoming odds in each match and, squeezes it out when you don't think he has a chance. I think the only one for me that I really feel strongly about is that I think Shota Umino, if he can make it all the way to that Evil match at the very end, is going to be a very interesting match that, kind of defines his year, whether he beats Evil on the last night or not.
So the last few people here we'll get through fairly quickly. Sonata has been basically anonymous in this tournament. Considering he went undefeated in group play last year, he has been a non-entity. He lost to Jake Lee in that match that was very quick just to put Jake over. He lost to Evil in a not particularly interesting match. He defeated Callum Newman with the deadfall, but that one was fairly quick. It was an athletic match, but it wasn't long. So it was too short to really get going. So after last year, he's had a couple of quick matches, a loss to Evil to keep him in play as the heel, but Sonata has just kind of been there, nothing impressive and not really in a position to shine. So it's been a tough early go for Sonata, and you can almost forget he's here.
I feel like I got a question for you when it comes to Sonata, Steven. What would you say? What word would you use when you would describe the impact that Sonata has had on the G1 so far?
This G1 we're talking about?
Yeah.
I mean, just a blank.
I would say Sonata.
Jeez.
He's been less of an impact than, honestly, that's the joke that I can make. Like, he's had no impact. And not it. Yeah. And I just I felt so strongly that they were going to protect him a bit more, given that he was the IWGP champion this time last year. But he's just been de-emphasized, and he is a full mid-card guy. And that's fine, given that we got another guy in the faction now that they are clearly trying to put front and center. So the de-emphasis really may be deliberate because all the other guys, besides Doki, let's give Doki his flowers. He's being positioned more front and center than he is fourth or fifth in the faction.
Yeah, I mean, I think the funny thing about Sonata is he's probably, if this push for Uemura continues, he's probably fourth in his own just 5 guys. I mean, really, I mean, Doki's ahead of him. I think Taichi is more interesting than he is, and Uemura is on the way up. So really, it's just like Taka behind him.
It may just be like this is fallout from really trying to shoot the rocket under another guy in a faction.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's take a look at Callum Newman. Now, very, very quick loss to Sonata, then lost to Zack. No shame in the Zack loss. He beat Umino on night 1, like we talked about. But this is about reps for Callum Newman. It's not about him winning a whole bunch of points. We said he needs to have good matches, or if he does, it'll really help his career. He hasn't had a bad one yet, but Umino wasn't 100% in his. Sonata's match was too fast. So Zack is the only really good one, but there's still plenty of time and 6 more matches against some of the better wrestlers in this group. So I think better things are ahead for him here, just not a lot of points.
I'm going to use a really weird analogy for Callum Newman that you may be on board with and you may not be. You play a lot of video games?
No.
You ever?
Sorry.
Never really? Not much?
Okay. No.
There are RPGs and stuff where you start with a character that has very low experience and you grind and you get more experience and you start upping your skill level and you become more apt at different things. And I feel like when we watch Callum Newman, we are seeing a person that started at level 1 with 0 experience and has been leveling up over and over and over again very rapidly since, say, October of last year. You had that match with Ishii, and you had this match with Taichi and a couple of the other, where it's just like you watched him graduate. You watch like the skill kind of accumulate and all these things. And there is no other wrestler that I can think of that so embodies the leveling up like in a video game that I've seen with Callum Newman in the last year. Even that first night in the G1 where he came out with his fur jacket and the upgrade and the gear and all that, it just felt like this guy is at a different level than he was when he started. And that was a great debut match for him at the G1. And I was really happy that he won. Totally shocked. Did not see that one coming at all.
Well, I think better days are ahead for him in this G1, let alone ahead, but a really bright future. And then the only other person from A Block we need to talk about here is on 0 points. It's Great-O-Khan, who is doing something interesting as usual. He's definitely an outside the box thinker when it comes to his character. He said he wants to wrestle other people's style in this tournament, which is a really bad idea under any circumstances. And it's not working, but that's the whole point. It'll make him look foolish and stubborn if it continues. But he did express frustration with the whole thing after his 3rd loss, just saying that it's almost over for me here. But he does this thing where we're going to wrestle. And he's also strangely referring to himself as we in post-match comments. He never does anything normal. It's always interesting to hear his comments afterwards, but he's been wrestling really well. Like, these matches have been good. He's just losing them. And I don't know if he's going to continue this whole idea of wrestling other people's matches or if this is some sort of storyline where he's going to find himself. But I think Great-O-Khan's going to get some wins. But so far, he's been having really good matches, but coming out on the wrong end of them.
Like an art house boutique version of the G1 that he's wrestling. He's just trying to be like the private art studio version and just I'm going to do this version of the G1 tonight. And I'm going to do this one, rather than just go his style and do that. It's and it just you see him do that. You just see a guy that isn't going to win the G1. You know what I mean? It's just okay, you've let us all know you're just a guy in this thing and you're going to have matches and you're going to be a disruptor, if you will.
But he's trying to make something of it. He's trying not to say, well, I'm just going to go over there and go 2-7. He's going to say, I'm going to try to make something out of this and have an interesting story while doing it.
So there's good and bad in giving that away. You know what I mean? But he will be a fine disruptor. I totally expect him to win a couple matches in the next few weeks. Over the next 4 matches, I would say I would not be shocked if Great-O-Khan won 2 of them. If that makes any sense. Just kind of, that's kind of where he's at. in kind of the radar for him. He'll be fine. He's been fine. Definitely better than Jake Lee. And if you're better than Jake Lee, you're doing all right.
In the B block now, time to look at that one. And we have a clear leader atop the B block. There is one guy with 6 points.
Like his we all predicted.
Yuya Uemura. So he has had one of the tournament's best performances. Now, Jeremy, we said that for guys like Callum Newman, this was a chance to be seen, and good performances would help Newman's career. It's a little different for Uemura. We felt like Uemura really needed to look good here. That he had fallen behind some of his contemporaries. And if he came out here and kind of laid an egg in the G1, it might really hurt him. Like, he needed to have good matches. Well, boy, has he stepped up big in this tournament so far. He has not only gotten the results as far as being put over and winning the matches. That's a booking decision. His performances have been wonderful. This is the Yuya Uemura we wanted to see for a long time. And he got a win over David Finlay on night one in a fantastic match. Finlay hit 2 buckle bombs on him and then went for a third. But once again, Finlay's hubris gets him, which is a common story with Finlay. Uemura floated over the top out of that power bomb and rolled him up for a pin and a big upset. And we thought, oh, wow, well, there's the big moment for Uemura. Well, no, he had more. Against Hirooki Goto. He fought off a GTR and did a really nice backslide.
A mean guy, Hirooki Goto.
Yeah, and did a backslide into a deadbolt because, you know, when you do the backslide, you kind of have the other guy's arms. He turned that into a deadbolt and beat him. Doing well, showing good fire. And then he won the main event in Kagawa over Konosuke Takeshita in a fantastic match today. Survived a lot of high-impact offense from Takeshita. Worked Takeshita's arms, both of them. Worked both the left and the right. There was an excellent double down sequence of Germans. It was a poison rana, lariats where both guys kept getting up and then they both finally collapsed. Crowd was totally into it. Uemura worked the armbar and then won a very dramatic fight for a deadbolt to win. For me, highlight of the whole tournament has been seeing Yuya Uemura really blossom in a time when he needs to.
So I watched that match with Yuya Uemura and Takeshita finished about a half hour before the show started. And I just been kind of sitting on it for a little bit. And Steven, I think I've come to the conclusion that it might be one of my favorite matches of the year. Nice. And I think more so than some of these Danielson or Ospreay matches, because you knew that those matches were going to be coming in. And you had anticipation for them. Like, your level of, like, going into it, expecting, like, top class and getting it, the Swerve and Ospreay match, some of these New Japan matches that we had in the Cup, some of the New Japan matches in the G1 up to this point. This match slapped me in the face. It was so good. I think about, like, Kurt Angle matches, like methodically working a body part in order to get the win for the ankle lock. And I don't remember a match that I've seen where someone like Yuya Uemura so thoroughly dismantled an opponent for the entire match to the point where he got Takeshita in the position for the deadbolt suplex and Takeshita could not stop it. And the entire match was a methodical teardown of his body, every way, shape, or form, finding every opportunity, and it was a masterpiece. Like, I am so excited for Yuya Uemura in this tournament because what it told me, and it's told a number of people, is that the shackles, if you will, that have been on Yuya Uemura since he returned from excursion over in TNA, is that this has all been deliberate. You know, like, his ability and his work rate and everything that he's done has been, you know, unlocked, unshackled, whatever you want to say. And the G1 was his debut of the version of Yuya that we've all been waiting to see. It's almost as if, right? It's almost as if a movie montage happened that we did not see. like where he learned something and he upgraded in the background between point A and point B, like in Bloodsport with like the music, and he's training and doing all this stuff. And then he came out here and he just started blowing everybody away. And it's just like something changed, something happened. I want the backstory to it. I hope that the momentum continues. I hope that we're all wrong and Yuya Uemura wins this whole goddamn thing. I don't think that's the case, but I do think that everybody's opinion of Yuya Uemura has completely shifted as a result of the last week of G1 matches, more so than the entire year up to this point.
I think you're going to understand what I mean when I say that I don't think Yuya Uemura is going to win the G1, but he's already won the G1.
He's absolutely already won the G1.
And so he's come out of this so much stronger. So I believe he's getting the Jeff Cobb story where he's going to go on a big run and then falter late is where I still think this is going. Wouldn't hurt my feelings now that I'm seeing this Yuya Uemura if they wanted to keep him rolling a little bit further past that, but that still feels like where he's going. But just outstanding work for him.
And think about this real quick. Taichi's not in the G1.
No.
Sonata is currently not doing too great. There is a real possibility by the end of this tournament that there is a perception, given that Yuya wants to wrestle everyone in that faction already, that he is going to be front and center and the number one guy in that faction, if he's still in that faction at all within the next calendar year.
Yeah, he and Doki definitely moving to the forefront. Shark mentions that Uemura is quickly showing how good he can be, and Takeshita is a god. Those two were incredible together. They really were. And Colin's asking, do we think Takeshita is winning most of his matches because of Tony Khan and AEW?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I don't think Tony would have sent him over there if he were going to go, 2-7. I don't think that would have been allowed. So yes, the good news is Takeshita is a brilliant wrestler. We're going to talk about him next,
it doesn't matter.
and that we don't mind so much because he is a great performer. So he's been another highlight, and we figured he would be, and we were excited to see these matchups of Takeshita against some of these guys in New Japan. He fits right in, doesn't he? He won a fantastic match with Yota Tsuji on opening night. We had a feeling they were going to kick him off with a victory, but they had that crowd in Osaka absolutely rocking. Big move time was great in that one. He ended up countering the Gene Blast with a knee, then a Blue Thunder Bomb, and spinning driver to win. Just awesome. He wrestled Cobb in Hiroshima. Now, remember, he wasn't on the show on night 2 because he was wrestling for DDT at their Peter Pan event, which was nuts. I have actually watched most of it, and it's it's an experience. Anyway, I kind of had fun with it. But he beat Cobb in Hiroshima there. That was very good again. He had a stalling superplex of Jeff Cobb, Jeremy. That is a man who is confident in his quads, because that is a huge man to superplex. I had to go back. I tapped the rewind button a little bit to make sure he wasn't standing on the second rope so you can at least steady yourself at the top rope. Right. He was not. He did it off the top rope. A stalling suplex of Jeff Cobb. Stunning. And I just had to go back and make sure he really did it. Won it with a spinning driver again. Really good. Would love to see those two wrestle longer. I wish that match were a little bit longer than it was. And then he had the great main event with Uemura. We looked forward to him being here. It just makes me want to see more of him in New Japan rings. And he's been amazing. I can't wait to see the rest of his matches. Just 2 thumbs up and getting Konosuke Takeshita into this G1.
Somewhere in a different timeline, Konosuke Takeshita and Kazuchika Okada have been wrestling in New Japan for the last 8 years. Just main event levels, and it just didn't happen in this world. I was pretty critical about Takeshita, he having the IWGP match and kind of shoehorning him in to New Japan. And I really wanted a more organic introduction of Takeshita into New Japan. And I couldn't have hoped for a more organic opportunity than him in the G1 right now. He could have 1, he could have 3 matches in post-block play, going 25 minutes each. And I don't think he would, skip a beat. This guy is main event, any promotion that he goes to. He can hold his own in New Japan. Watching this match with Yuya and Takeshita today just made me feel like I was in love with pro wrestling again. And I remember watching Takeshita, and I wasn't big on all of Japanese pro wrestling 3 or 4 years ago, but I remember watching Takeshita on AEW Dark with these like 5-minute squash matches. I'm like, oh, this guy's special. You know, like there's something to this guy, and they've done more to make Takeshita feel special in the G1 in New Japan than they have in the last 2 years in AEW.
And Shark just mentions, we really did pay the Jake Lee tax in order to get Takeshita. That's an interesting way of putting it. So he's been fabulous. So there you go. So
there's proof to that one.
The other guy and another guy, there are a couple more actually, that are on 4 points. HENARE. So we have our never openweight champion. He defeated ELP in a match that seemed more about ELP's sadness than anything else on opening night. That was more of an ELP story match.
Right, whatever you want about me, I'm a sad man.
He kept shouting at ELP to show Tamashi, that fighting spirit is what that means. But Phantasmo went to do the stomp in the corner so that he would hit sudden death. You know, Shawn Michaels tribute there, but he couldn't pull the trigger on it dramatically. He's so sad. And that led to him getting caught with a clothesline, Streets of Rage, to win. We'll have more on that in the ELP segment here. He then beat Bolton, and he beat Oleg Bolton in a hard-hitting match. Oleg hit a kamikaze for 2, but HENARE got out of a second one and hit the hammerhead, that just a running headbutt. Streets of Rage to win. With that, right away, he has matched his 2023 point total in that G1. He did lose to Finlay in a battle of the underneath champions, you know, the global title and never openweight title. Another good match, well worked, well paced. They survived each other's secondary finishers with the big Uranagi and Finlay hitting the Dominator before he got caught with the overkill. The next win will exceed last year's points total, but he's ahead of the game in terms of match quality. I've enjoyed his work. And while, again, HENARE is not going to win this G1, it's important for him to have good matches, and he's accomplished that mission.
It honestly felt from last year to this year that one of the wrestlers most likely to have the biggest jump in success from last year to this year was going to be HENARE. You know, like he nearly killed himself. Right. Legit. He's the never openweight champion. There was really no like thought in my mind that he would end with maybe less than 8 points in this thing, which was a marked difference from last year. He's leveled up. He's got a title. They want to protect him. And he's like the new Ishii. Like, you're going to have a big, mean physical match with HENARE. You know, like you go in there and you're going to come out of there and feel like you're a changed man. The man is a vicious stone pit bull in his own way. You look at him and you're just like, you're going to feel every shot. You're going to feel every headbutt. You're going to feel every suplex. HENARE is one of those guys that is the litmus test for people that have been paying attention to New Japan and people who haven't been paying attention to New Japan. Because if you've been watching the New Japan product, you know that HENARE is a guy that will fuck you up. Like, and no, like, that's the best way to put it. But if you're not watching and you're just kind of paying attention, you think, oh, HENARE, he's just a guy in there. He's probably not going to win all that much because there's all these other big stars. That's not HENARE anymore. The guy is the gatekeeper of pain. And there's no other way to put it. It's like, you need to experience the pain if you're going to succeed in New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Ren Narita is also on 4 points. There's not a whole lot to talk about here. As we mentioned, that he's just kind of a guy that can beat anyone, could lose to anyone because of the House of Torture gimmick. He's been fine, but again, he doesn't wrestle much with this gimmick and the whole point of House of Torture and everything. So we know he's capable of wrestling better than this, but that's not the character right now. And like you mentioned, probably gearing up for some sort of real story of the House of Torture coming to a head with things with Tanahashi, and that's all to be told. So for right now, he's just being as much of a jerk as possible to set that up. Not much to say on this one. He's probably going to finish middle of the pack, just like he has been here, and he's not doing as much wrestling because he's telling this story.
I want to give it credit that the House of Torture shenanigans in his matches aren't completely like over the top. They've been mitigated to some extent. There's still low blows and there's still the push-up bar, but I haven't seen, to my recollection, so much House of Torture interference where it became overbearing or unbearable. So I will give credit to those matches, even though, you know, the House of Torture gimmick, the style, like the Jeff Cobb match, for example. Like you almost knew with the way the match was going how it was going to end, just by the basis of like the blueprint of the match. And it's fine. He's doing his thing, but Red Narita is such a physical and kind of hardcore wrestler that sometimes it feels like he's just spinning his wheels doing the House of Torture thing when he's like just hardcore disqualification matches and such.
Yota Tsuji is on 2 points. Time to get to the guys with 2. And Yota, to me, is among the more interesting ones on 2. He's having an excellent tournament. That loss to Takeshita was one of the best matches so far, as was his main event win over Finlay. You can't ask much more than that from him. The El Phantasmo loss was interesting, but it was also a really good match. He lost to Phantasmo earlier today. Maybe he's had the most consistently good matches, he and Finlay, which we're about to get to. Makes me feel good about my pick, despite the slow start. Again, I think he's going to surge, but Tsuji really wrestling well and has true charisma and a real connection to the fans. So I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing, even if the results aren't there quite yet.
You know, maybe about an hour ago, we were talking about Zack Sabre Jr. and we were expressing our concern for the lack of a struggle. You know, that they were just going a little too easy for this guy. When you look at Yota Tsuji, this is what you were more thinking of in terms of what kind of struggle that he'd have to overcome. He is near the bottom of the block in terms of points. He's got to surpass at least 6 people at this point in order to 7 people in order to make it through. There's nobody with any less points than him. His back is against the wall. He can maybe lose one more match, but this is the kind of narrative and drama that you are trying to serve when you are your guy you wanted to win. The drama of him winning these matches, it's all right there for Yota Tsuji. Is he going to take the reins from Naito at Wrestle Kingdom? You know, if the first leg of the G1 is any indication, it feels like you might want to put some more money behind the Yota Tsuji horse than anybody else, because this is the blueprint there. He's got everything, man. He's got the charisma. He's got everything that, you know, Jake Lee lacks. You know, when you talk about presence and charisma, you know, helping you along when the work rate isn't there. He's got the work rate too. So he's got all the things that you need. And I'm just watching this. I'm like, man, this new generation taking over. I don't know how they're going to do it or what the story is going to be, but it's just a matter of time.
David Finlay is also on 2 points, and he has also had 3 very good matches in this tournament. I still expect him to be a very big part of this down the stretch. Yeah, he lost to Uemura in that excellent match to start where the hubris got him. Lost a really good main event to Tsuji on night 2. So he's the contender who goes behind the 8 ball early and won that big one against HENARE. So getting the momentum going here. He's got the 1 win. And but again, doing his job, man. David Finlay just goes in and wrestles well. And again, that power, he is so deceptively strong. He's had a couple of moments where he's just throwing guys around the ring right there.
How about that Dominator move?
Looks fantastic. I'm really impressed with him. I understand that maybe he's not as over as they were hoping he'd be at this point, but I think it's starting to dial in. Man, he's a hell of a talent.
So for people wondering what I mentioned when I say the pile driver move, it's the move that Finlay grabs. It's almost like a pile driver position, right? But he grabs him and he hucks him up onto one of his shoulders, and then he flapjacks the guy straight onto the ground. And it takes a lot of strength to do that. And he makes it look like you are dead based off of how how hard he throws you onto the ground. And I know that Finlay has his detractors and that there are people that are like, he shouldn't be the leader of Bullet Club and this and that. But man, he serves a role. And if New Japan is faltering, it's not because of David Finlay. That's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, and I think there are fewer detractors. I think he's won some people over. I don't hear that as much as I used to. I still do, but I still hear I hear it less than I used to. I think he's starting to
I just hope it's not people just stopped watching and stopped talking about it in general rather than accepting that he's fine.
It's not. And I'm not saying that those people are turning around saying that David Finlay's the new whoever. But those people are still talking about New Japan, and they're talking less about how David Finlay isn't working. Shark says Finlay's been great, consistently grinding, getting little to no respect. I feel like I'm mostly there with him at this point. Gabe being next to him hurts a little bit, but Finlay's been great. I think they've been smart to kind of keep those two apart. You haven't seen Gabe and Finlay in the same place as much as you used to. I don't think that's an accident either, because right now Gabe is telling another story. Jeff Cobb is also on 2 points. Sorry to hurry this along, but I'm just looking at the time here. Cobb, really good matches, but kind of a non-entity in the tournament storyline. He got that win over Goto on night 1 with a really impressive finish where he powered out of an attempted inside cradle, got Goto, who's a big man, all the way up in a suplex position, popped him up in the air, caught him for Tour of the Islands. I mean, Jeff Cobb doing Jeff Cobb things. He's always very impressive. Lost to Takeshita in a match we mentioned earlier. Really good. Wasn't long enough for my taste, just because I want to see those guys wrestle a lot. And then he was upset by Narita with the push-up bar and the low blow stuff. Mm-hmm. So Cobb is not getting the protection he's had in past G1s. The only thing I want to mention here besides that, Jeremy, is in a post-match comment. This is a small thing that maybe I'm reading too much into, but he mentioned Jonah. And it was an odd time to mention Jonah. He brought up Jonah as kind of an avatar for himself, a big man who's had success in the G1, and then just said, "See you soon." And in a way that made me go, what do you mean you're seeing Jonah soon? Wait a minute now. So perhaps these results, only 2 points, is New Japan protecting himself in case we don't have Jeff Cobb down the road, not too far. It's a little amazing to me, Jeremy, in the midst of a time when we have 2 competitive wrestling companies, that neither one of them has thrown a ton of money at Jeff Cobb. And I have a feeling that day is coming. I don't know. I have no inside info, but 2 points. He's saying hello to a guy in WWE like that. Yeah, maybe some fire.
I don't necessarily have inside info, but I've always been under the impression that the only promotion Jeff Cobb really wanted to work for was New Japan Pro Wrestling. That may have changed, but I do know that he is probably not going to work in AEW. Yeah, if that makes it for a long term. If you've got a booking here or there. He's fine. He'll do business. He'll do that. But I think he prefers New Japan to AEW significantly. And I don't know where the dynamic of WWE comes into play. But I think the first couple of nights of the G1 is an awful weird time to start teasing that.
Well, it is, but just the way I wish I could bring it up here the way he did it. But it was just a matter of, you can mention Jonah. That's fine. You can even compare yourself to Jonah. It's an interesting point to make. But then just to go, "Hi, buddy, see you soon." And I'm just like,
Hey, what happened when Jeff Cobb made a bunch of open challenges at Forbidden Door for the New Japan title? Who did he end up wrestling for that?
They stuck him in a Chris Jericho match.
Jeff Cobb talks a lot.
Well, I think those were plans that were made, and
I'm sure they were.
Somebody else knocked on Tony's door, and
I'm sure they were. But at the same time, you have to take what Jeff Cobb says with a certain grain of salt.
Well, again, I think that open challenge was going to be a thing, and then he found out, oh wait, no, Chris has interjected himself into things again. So Oleg Boltin is on 2 points. Now, this is a guy that just about reps and experience. He does have new gear and new music. A little tribute to the snow leopard, which is an animal associated with Kazakhstan, and also a bit of a mythical figure, although it's not mythical, it's a real thing, but it's a venerated animal there in Kazakhstan. He has a little bit tribute to the snow leopard. Looked pretty cool. Got the crowd behind him with a classic babyface win over Ren Narita to open things up. At that point, Jeremy, he had the longest singles win streak in the entire company. Go figure. But it was a good, fun opener. He lost to HENARE in a good one. Then lost again to Goto and Kagawa. He did the gut wrenches on Goto. Good grief. He is developing into a good worker. And yes, his opponents carry a lot of the freight, but he is doing well. He's holding up his end of it. The best case scenario for Oleg in this tournament is that he gets experience with these singles matches, improves with each one. I think we are absolutely seeing him accomplish that goal. And imagine a guy with that size and that strength who turns into a really good worker. I mean, the sky's the limit.
I'm watching these Oleg Boltin matches, especially with HENARE and Hirooki Goto. And we'll get to Hirooki Goto at some point.
Sure.
But boy, it sure looked like they were laying it in on each other. Like we are initiating you to New Japan Pro Wrestling. Oleg, you got big days coming ahead of you, but these are not your big days yet, kind of thing. And
I am still your senpai.
they were rough nights for Boltin Oleg, but you know what? He gave as good as he got, and I felt like it was those kind of matches that need to happen that like test your mettle, that this guy can go 10, 15 minutes, but eventually you're going to be going 15, 20, 25 minutes, and you're going to have to be able to, take this kind of punishment and wrestle. And these are great guys to put him through his paces. And it's not malicious, but this is wrestling.
Then we have El Phantasmo, who's New Japan's droopy dog. Against HENARE, he couldn't load up the super kick. He did do a Burning Hammer and Thunder Kiss 86 for a 2 count. That got the fans into it, but he lost. Narita beat him after kicking out of the Thunder Kiss again. Again, the fans were behind him as an underdog, trying to get him to win, but he lost to the double cross. The fan reactions in Osaka on the second night weren't anything like they were the first. It was a very different crowd, but there were a couple of ELP chants. He defeated Tsuji and Kagawa. So the story of this was Tsuji overpowering him for a while. ELP sold his knee really well. He managed to dodge Gene Blast. He hit Sudden Death and CR2, but he couldn't cover him right away. I kind of thought he was going to lose again after that when he didn't cover him. But Tsuji ended up getting the knees up for the Thunder Kiss. So then it looked like he was really doomed. But then when he went to cover him, ELP rolled him up in a small package and got the pin. A flash pin, surprise pin, but a really good match. Fans were genuinely surprised he got the win. So ELP, of course, he's heartbroken. We know all this. In fact, he did commentary on the Hiroshima show, and he was so morose that you actually could not understand what he was saying. He was mumbling to the point that I turned on Japanese commentary for a while for a couple of reasons.
It was not good.
I turned on Japanese commentary for a couple of matches just because, one, I'm working on my Japanese and it helps me to hear it. And then the other thing is just because I couldn't understand what ELP was saying. Mm-hmm. But again, Walker tried to pull through all that and did yeoman's work there. So there is so much talk about how he feels lonely and so much talk about how sad ELP is that I almost feel like someone, I have no idea who, but is going to come up and motivate him late in this tournament for the big match with Finlay. And I don't think it's Hikuleo. I think Hikuleo's busy with WWE, but it almost feels like somebody is going to come out of the woodwork and say, "You got this, kid," and bring his smile back and help him to that big win over Finlay. I still hold out hope for that. This thing's got to be going somewhere.
Match could go either way, but I will say I'm glad ELP has a story. He's not just a guy thrown in there. I'm not compelled by this. Like, it felt like the easiest story that you could do with ELP is like, I'm sad my friends are gone, but they are going so hard in the middle of these matches that it's actually kind of taken away from like the G1 matches. And you kind of have to go hard. You can only do so much pantomiming in the middle of a match or do like commentary, and some people are listening in English and whatever. Like, your biggest opportunity to do this is convey it in the middle of the ring. It's just a lot. And you don't know where he's going to go either way. He could lose his mind. He could just go completely insane by the end of the tournament. He could get that win that cost Finlay, an opportunity at the end. But Finlay losing quite a bit at the beginning kind of makes me a little worried unless he's going to go on a run for the next few matches all the way to the very end. ELP is a supporting character for the rest of the block, and I think that's just basically the way to put it.
I'm worried that the story is El Phantasmo ends up crawling back to Bullet Club, and it goes poorly for him there. That's my worry, that he's going to be so sad.
What if there's a completely new faction and Bullet Club goes completely different with Jake Lee, and then all of a sudden you have a bunch of these other guys that have to create something new?
I'm in with that. That's what I say. I'm afraid of that storyline. It's going somewhere. I don't think this is all just for naught. But after that, the last person to talk to, Hirooki Goto, I knew there would not be a lot of wins for him, but his matches have been strong. We talked about his loss to Cobb, and that was a really good one. It was just what we wanted there, that match. He lost to Uemura on night 2. That was good. He beat Bolton and Kagawa. We talked about that. We kind of put Bolton through his paces. If they hold on to this structure for the G1 where you might have to go into the play-in tournament if you don't score well, that could be where Goto is heading as he kind of ages out of these
the
G1s.
bottom guy in the block is booted to the play-in the next year.
Could be something like that. I love him. The thing is with Goto, he has fewer miles on his body than Ishii. He's just not as beaten up. And so he still has pretty good. Of course, Ishii still has great matches, so that doesn't help him either. But he can still wrestle very well. But like we said, as we look through this tournament and all the stories that we're telling, just not a lot of victories for Goto in this, and we're seeing that. So the best thing he can do is have good matches along the way, and he's doing his job as he always does. He's just one of those real workhorses that's always there, always giving you quality work. That's Hirooki Goto in this G1.
Honestly, I really liked his match with Yuya Uemura, just being the mean old bastard that said you're not getting through me easily. I liked what was another match? Oleg Bolton match. That was a strong one for me. I like the Hirooki Goto raging against the dying of the light story. Yeah. He's the guy in this where it's like he's the longest tenured guy. They've driven that home. It's like this guy's been around for a while and he's not going to win a whole lot of matches, but damn it, he's going to make you fight to win your match against him. And watching him just get more and more meaner through these matches as he's trying to stop people from using him to get 2 points. Honestly, that's a great use of Hirooki Goto.
Yes, it is.
Just have him be the guy that's just F you got to beat me. And then at the very end, have him and Jeff Cobb or him and HENARE, whatever match that I think it's HENARE. Have him and HENARE after him just going through no, you are not getting through me. No, you are not getting through me. Then he ends up beating HENARE at the last night. You got a mean guy match set up for the Never title. Everybody's happy. And Hirooki Goto, a guy that we never thought was going to win the G1, comes out looking just fine, if a little bit meaner.
It is a good story for him. And he has a lot of function here in this G1. He's the last guy to win it in his first attempt. Yeah, and it goes all the way to him being the oldest guy in it. So there's a through line there. And plus, he still has his niche in the current G1 system as being part of the top gatekeeper tag team with Yoshihashi. Bishamon is always the measuring stick that if you beat Bishamon, that means you are a legit threat for the IWGP World Tag Team title. He really serves a lot of masters there and does it all really well. So I like him. And like Shark says, he's all reliable. And they're playing into it by really talking about the new generation with him. Even guys like Cobb and Zach are talking about how they're not going to be pushed aside. It's been the theme for the whole tournament. Well, that is the look at each person in this one. Now, I want to talk about a couple of things here. We got a few minutes left.
I got previews for the next couple of days.
We do, yes. But I want to talk about attendance for this past week, just because, I like to get into this stuff. But the 2 nights in Osaka combined for 6,722 fans. Last year was 6,425, so up a little bit. Last year, the shows were almost even in attendance, but this year it was front-loaded, 4,177 on night 1, down to 2,545 on night 2. But between the 2 nights, up in Osaka, Hiroshima was almost identical to last year. 1972 this year, 2006 last year, almost the same. And I think that's a victory because, no Okada, no Ospreay, less ticket selling drawing power theoretically, but it came out even. So to me, that said that Hiroshima is at least interested. Kagawa was down 300 from last year, 1,219. They were about 1,500 last year. So that's some of the little attendance notes there from this G1. So let's look ahead to what's coming up this week. We will be in Nagasaki in Block B action. That is coming up. What is that? Saturday, correct? Or is that tomorrow morning?
So 27 and 28.
Yeah. Okay. So that's okay. So Nagasaki is Uemura versus Takeshita, HENARE versus Finlay, Goto and Bolton, and Cobb versus Narita, ELP, and Yota. Let's see there, yeah. And then Sunday and Monday they're in Fukuoka. Oh, so excuse me. I think I just had that incorrect there. So Sunday and Monday are in Fukuoka. Block B is again on Sunday with Goto versus Tsuji and HENARE versus Takeshita. A block on Monday is Naito versus Sonata in the main event, Shingo versus Gabe Kidd, and Zack Sabre Jr. versus Shota. And why don't you talk about that a little bit? And I'm going to look up something because I think I may have gotten the Nagasaki main matches wrong. I'm going to double check them right now.
I was just going to go with the ones that I grabbed off the New Japan World, and I knew that one day was Shingo and Callum.
Yeah, pardon me.
And then we got Yuya and Gabe Kidd.
Here's what we have. I apologize. It is so the next shows are Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Saturday's in Nagasaki. That one's headlined by Naito versus Evil, Zach and that Jake Lee match. And then we'll also see Shingo and Callum Newman. That is Saturday in Nagasaki. And then you have the two shows in Fukuoka, Sunday and Monday. Pardon my confusion there.
I don't have the slate for Monday, but just Saturday and Sunday. But we're one
more show before we come back next week. One more. Yeah, and then there's one more show this week. It's Wednesday in Yamaguchi, and that one is Takeshita versus Finlay. An interesting one. Tsuji versus Bolton. That'll be fun in Yamaguchi. That's Wednesday, and then we'll be back here Thursday to talk about everything we've seen and heard.
Yeah. Do you feel good about the G1? You feel like you're excited and refreshed and new day in New Japan and all that?
Well, I'm excited about it. I like the theme of young versus older, the old guard trying to keep the young guys from coming up.
Mm-hmm.
I like that Uemura has been performing as well as he is. I like what they're doing with Finlay. I'm intrigued, and I'm anxious to see the fresh matchups. Takeshita has been fantastic. Mm-hmm. Like I said, Lee's been struggling, but I'm fascinated to see where they go with Naito. I'm in. This has been a lot of fun to watch to me. And this week coming up, these 4 shows have a lot of intrigue for me as well. And I think when we come back here next Thursday, we'll have a much clearer picture as we go down the stretch to where they're headed with these last couple of key moments, because they're going to do the whole thing where most of these guys are going to be in contention until the very end. But I think we'll have a little bit more of a clue where they're going next Thursday, and I'm fascinated to see it.
More than anything else, I'm delighted to be surprised.
And then Colin mentions that they had the recent DDT match. We're not signing off quite yet because we got to answer some of Dunstan's questions. He said DDT was the right promotion for Kota Ibushi to do on his comeback. He did come back on that show with Takeshita. Takeshita wrestled in the DDT show against Masato Tanaka. Kota Ibushi came back in a whack job of a match with Senshiro Takagi and Dino. One of the strangest things I've ever seen, although I was entertained by it. But he is apparently going to come back to a DDT ring. Like you said, Colin says he can have matches where he doesn't have to do a whole lot. And Shark just says, things are going well so far. It's interesting to see the G1 develop further. The matches have been great. Stories have been interesting. That's all we ask for. So let's look at Dunstan's questions here, because I promised we would answer them here. Dunstan says, of the 3 nights, who performed the best in your opinion between Newman and Oleg? I think it's Bolton right now, but only because of where they've had Newman and who they've had Newman in with. I think Newman's only had the one real good match, but I think his best opponents are still to come. So I think we might have a different answer by the end of it. He says,
I think it's Newman.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Oleg has been carried by his opponent more than Newman has.
Okay.
I think Oleg's looked great, but I think that's been by design with the way the match layouts. And I think Newman has had to work harder to look good in his matches, and I think he has.
We've answered a couple of these just over the course of the conversation, Dustin. I think you'll agree there. And he says, with Zach beating Naito in the no, pardon me, this is the one we already answered. But he said, did it feel like Takeshita was right at home in New Japan? Yep. He's been great. Do you think it's deliberate that Shota hasn't evolved yet from his Tanahashi phase? Or is that Shota just prefer being a babyface? Well, he's booked that way. I don't think Shota is making any demands on that. I think that's just where they want him right now as the babyface going into this thing with, I think he's going to have something to do with Hantai and the resurgence, either leaving it or leading it. I think he's going to be a major player because Tanahashi in his 10-point plan said something about Hantai still being a major force and getting it to be a major force. Shota's got something to say about that.
I feel like Shota is suffering from a case of arrested development. Take that for what it's worth.
Yeah. He says, are Evil and Sonata just not good rivals? None of their matches have felt big or special and just feel lackluster. They're not good rivals. No, they were a good tag team, but no, they're not particularly good against each other. And he said, with Despe out and Hiromu focusing on the Never title, who do you think would be an interesting enough to challenge for the junior title in the fall? I think this would be an excellent chance for Kosei Fujita to get a shot and maybe not win it, but to have the match. I would like to see Fujita and Doki, but a lot of time to figure that out. But that's kind of the one I'm hoping for. I feel like that's the one that feels good.
What about Master Wado?
Yeah, well, when he comes back and if he's healthy, then I would love to see that.
We're getting close, I feel like. We're getting
maybe
close.
So. And let's see. And did Shota versus Gabe feel like a potential Wrestle Kingdom main event if booked right? I don't know about a main event. I don't know about a main event, but I do think it could absolutely be a featured match.
A marquee match.
Yeah, like one of the ones that's headlined there. So, and he says maybe it's just me. Does Naito versus Zack feel special enough from a story aspect to main event the Dome? That's what I think it is. That's my prediction that they are headed that way. So, yeah, I feel like absolutely that they could main event the Dome, and I kind of predicted it would happen. So I got to stand by it now, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything else from you, Jeremy, before we wrap this one up this week?
I am ready to G1 go see some Deadpool and Wolverine tonight.
All right. Don't forget our other shows here on the Fight Game Media Network. We have Power Bombshells. We have the Dynamite Show. We have, Observe This. We've got a lot of great content. Check out the podcast feed for more great stuff like the Wrap and, and the 5-Star Joshi Show. Good grief. We're coming up on the 5-Star Grand Prix there. Their big run there in Stardom. A lot of interesting stuff going on there. We'll be back next week to talk about all of it. So with that in mind, enjoy 4 more shows of the G1. We'll be back to recap it and look ahead. So for Jeremy Finestone, I'm Steven Conway. Thank you again for joining us for Speaking of Strong Style. Whether you did it here on YouTube or you do it on the podcast feed, we're very grateful you spend your time with us. And we will talk to you again real soon.
30 matches this week, 20 matches next week. Full steam ahead.